Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Hood, and I'm the manager of the health promotion team in Borden. And I am going to take you through a webinar today on injury prevention strategies. So whether you are that at-home workout type person who's just starting a training program, or you are that athlete who is into, a bit more competitive or even recreational type sports, or you're just looking for tips and tools to really add to your toolbox, I'm hoping that I have something to provide everybody today. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through my top 10 tips of things that have been scientifically researched, evidence-based, proven, to give you the best info that we can. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my experiences as well as I go through these top 10 tips. And hopefully we can, I was going to say have an open discussion, but as this is being recorded, that's probably not going to happen. But I can share with you some discussions that I've had with other groups as well. So without further ado, give me one moment. I'm just going to share my screen here and we're going to get going. All right, so injury reduction strategies for sports and physical activity. So what we're going to be discussing today, let's see if I can get this to work, and it doesn't seem to be working, which is interesting. So just bear with me while we troubleshoot this. There we go. So things that we're going to be talking about today is we're going to do a little bit of an introduction, which we actually have already done. We're going to talk a little bit about what we already know in terms of the data and the research out there when it comes to sports and physical activity in the Canadian Armed Forces. We're going to talk about some evidence-based strategies, so some tips and tools that have been proven to help you with your sports and physical activity training. How important is physical activity? Just a little sidebar, it's really important. So we're going to emphasize those facts and give you some stats on that. And we're also going to talk about protective sports equipment, what we should be wearing, a little bit on the culture, why people don't like wearing some of it, and the importance of it all. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to do is kick it off with a little bit of a discussion. So my first question to everyone is, which body part is most at risk of injuring the calf? So typically when I survey a group this question, what I hear back the most is the back, almost every single time. I just did this presentation a few days ago and the same thing happened. Everyone put their hand up and they were adamant that it was the back. The answer is in fact the leg, which is quite interesting. The back is one of those places that if you get injured, you feel it, you know it, it hurts, and it will slow you down. It's more prominent and it is very recognized, and it's not something you can really push through. The leg encompasses a lot of different issues and parts. So the leg would include the ankle, the knee, maybe even the hip joint, as well as all the muscles, tendons, joints, ligaments in between those parts. So that could include things like plantar fasciitis. It could include things like a hamstring pull. It could include a sprained ankle. So oftentimes we see more leg injuries than anything else when it comes to the Canadian Armed Forces. Which activity produces the most injuries in the calf? It's interesting because we've been doing this presentation for quite a while and the data hasn't really changed that much. Oftentimes we hear either soccer or hockey. And when we think about sports, we think about those being very acute type injuries. So what I want to do right now is I want to talk a little bit about the differences between an acute injury and a chronic injury. So an acute injury, it happens fast and you know it. You can't push through it. You can't really try to work around it. It's there and it happens almost instantly. Those chronic type injuries are those injuries that creep up on you. So they start maybe as something small and then they can grow into something much bigger. So what I mean by that is maybe, you start running and you feel a little twinge in the back of your heel and you're like, well, I want to get faster and I want to get stronger. So I'm going to do more hill work. So you keep running those hills, you keep pushing really hard and that pain becomes worse and it becomes a little bit worse. And then all of a sudden, when you try to get up off the couch, a chair, or out of bed in the morning after you've been sitting for a long period of time, everything is so tight and so painful. So a chronic injury takes a little bit of time to work into a full-blown injury, and oftentimes you can still push through it. Not that you should, you definitely should not. You really need to take care of both of those. but that's the biggest difference between the two. So looking at this slide, when you say hockey or soccer, you see a lot of acute injuries, whether that's a contusion with a hockey stick or a sprained ankle or something like that. You're going to see those happen fast, and they're very obvious. What actually causes the most injuries in the calf is running. Running injuries are those chronic injuries that tend to creep in, and they don't happen all of a sudden. So a lot of people are surprised when they hear running is the thing that causes the most injuries. You have to remember too, when we talk about hockey and soccer, those are sports, and you need to train to play sports in order to be effective. It would be very irresponsible of me to put someone who couldn't skate out on out to the ice rink to play hockey with people who are very experienced. But yet we still see that quite often in the Canadian Armed Forces, where we have people who are inexperienced in running, which is a sport, out with people that are experienced all the time, mostly because running is one of the easiest things for units to do. Typically all it requires is a pair of sneakers and a little bit of motivation. So we have to be very, very careful with that. We will be talking a lot more about running in this presentation, but first I've got another question for you. True or false? Static stretching before your workout reduces your risk of injury. So before I answer that question, and I know you're thinking about it, let me tell you the difference between static and dynamic. So a static stretch is a stretch that you hold for a longer period of time. So as an example, this to hold for 30 seconds would be an example of a static stretch, okay? A dynamic stretch would be, it's not even really per se a stretch, but it's movement consistent with the functional movements that you're going to be doing in a workout. So let's say, for example, I was doing overhead presses and I would do like 15 of these really quick. These would be an example of static stretching. So you're training your muscles to work and get warm for the exercise or activity that you're about to do. So when it comes to static stretching before your workout reduces the risk of injury, it is actually false. Static stretching, especially if you've already done some type of cardiovascular exercise, will actually do quite the opposite. It actually works to cool you down, which is what you don't want when you're trying to warm up. True or false? Performing functional exercises like squats, deadlifts, cleans will improve your core stability. So these are some of my absolute favorite exercises for core stability and overall operational fitness. They train your body and your muscles to work together. They do not isolate. And in that sense, they have to engage your core and help with that stability. So this is absolutely true. These are some of the best exercises you could do to help improve your core strength and stability. True or false? Back support belts help improve your heavy lifting technique and reduce risk of back injury. This is in fact also false. Although it could help you achieve that max lift weight, that is a possibility, but it can also be detrimental to your lifting and your back health. Typically, when we see back injuries happen, it's not while they're doing the exercise or the weight. It's bending over to pick up something off the floor or pick up your kids or even the groceries. So in that sense, it's really more important to train with proper technique and not use a back belt to help all the time lift to more than you can handle, essentially. True or false? Choosing a running shoe that is tailored to your foot will help prevent injuries. This is the question that surprises people the most. The answer to this question is actually false. So I remember when I first started shopping for running shoes, I always thought I had to have a certain fit for my foot. Whether it was a structured shoe with a structured bar, or because I was flat-footed, or a shoe that stopped me from pronating or underpronating or overpronating, or all of these things, which still we often sometimes hear in stores today when we go shopping for shoes. If you have a healthcare professional, whether it's a podiatrist, a physiotherapist, or your doctor recommend certain things for you, it's important to listen to them because they would have a reason for it. So as an example, when I was injured, I had posterior tibialis tendonitis, which meant the tendon in the side of my foot wasn't really as tight as it should be. It needed a little extra support. I ran with an insole for a short period of time until I was able to strengthen it and work back into my normal shoe. So what I'm trying to say is listen to them. Don't just take this general statement. But if you are someone who has no injuries right now and you are looking to get maybe faster or run longer, you don't necessarily need to have a specialized running shoe. A simple neutral shoe that's tailored to your foot, that is not necessarily tailored to your foot, that has the appropriate amount of cushion, will suffice. That said, you have to make sure you're changing your running shoes every 500 to 700 kilometers at the absolute most. This is an interesting slide, and I like to show it just to give a little bit of perspective. So the running injuries, it's first for repetitive strain injuries or chronic injuries, which I had talked about. Hockey is first for acute injuries, weightlifting, soccer, and so on. This isn't really much of a surprise based off of what we discussed previously in the other slides. All right, so one quick drink, since I'm doing a lot of talking here. And we're going to move into our top 10 tips to reduce injuries. Most of these are things that you can actually start doing right away. So our first one, alternate those high and low impact days. Oftentimes, especially for people who are highly motivated and really like training and physical activity, we feel that if a little is good, a lot is going to be great. So if I'm going to run on Monday, I want to run on Tuesday, and I want to run on Wednesday. Really, that can be very detrimental to your performance and actually move you in a direction that is opposite of the direction you want. So what I mean by alternate high and low impact days is that if you're doing something that causes a lot of impact to your lower body, you want to make sure the next day you are doing something that is very lower impact. So example, if I am running on Monday, Tuesday would be a good day to go for a swim or maybe go on a bike or do some type of a resistance training program where you're not getting the constant pounding on the lower limbs, okay? If you are rock marching, that is also considered to be a high impact activity. Things like drill or basketball or soccer, also high impact activities. So if you know you have a soccer game on a Wednesday, you might want to avoid those high impact activities on both days before and after that game. And making sure you alter those days gives your body enough time to recover. And it's in that recovery that you are able to build back stronger to help you run longer, faster, or train harder. This is one most of the calf does not like to do. Progress slowly. Now, this is true for a lot of people, not just the people that are just starting training. It's also true for the people that are very fit and are trying a new modality. So example, if I am a swimmer and I want to start running, I could be a very fit swimmer, okay? My cardiovascular system might be super strong and I'm able to swim for hours if I needed to. But that doesn't mean you can run for hours, okay? We are trying to avoid injury here. So progressing any type of program slowly, if you're new to the modality, is very, very important. There's a few different ways that you can progress a program. You can progress it with your frequency, so how often a week you're training, your intensity, okay, so how hard, fast, the time, so how long you're going to be doing that activity, and also the type. So you can kind of switch up those modalities if you need to. All of those things said, you shouldn't progress any of them past 5 to 10% per week. So typically when I'm doing any program planning, I would pick one of them and be like, okay, we are going to progress 10% of your distance this week, as an example. When it comes to periodizing programs, it's important to talk to a professional, and our PSP fitness staff are amazing at the programs that they offer. And what you want to be looking for is that next tip there is decreasing your training intensity the second and third week. So why you want to do that is it gives that body a chance to recover. So I could go hard on week 1, maybe hard on week 2, but week 3, maybe 4, or even if you're brand new to training, it might be week 2, week 3, you're decreasing the intensity a little bit. So let me give you an example of what that might look like. If I have you on a running program and we're going to run 3 days a week, okay? And for 2 of those days, we're going to run intervals. And the 1 day we're going to run just distance nice and easy. On that second and third week, instead of having those intervals, we're just going to do distance. So it kind of decreases that intensity a bit, but you're still getting that physical activity in there. That gives the body time to adjust. The thing about activities like running is your cardiovascular system will adapt the quickest, It's your ligaments and tendons that are going to take the longest. So even though you might be fit in other modalities, as an example, maybe you're a great hockey player or a basketball player, just to turn around and run 5K or 10K, you could greatly injure yourself by doing that, even though cardiovascular wise, you're able to do that. So just keep those things in mind and progress any program slowly. Active warm-up. So this is really, really important. I talked a little bit about dynamic stretching already. When it comes to your active warm-up, the one thing I would like to see more units doing and more people doing is mimicking the activities that you're going to do in your training. So as an example, if I am going running, I am going to mimic running. So for the most part, I could just start with a slow jog, maybe work my quads, glutes, and hamstrings a little bit more with some high knees or some A skips, really warming up that Achilles tendon as well. But essentially, I'm going to be doing some running. It's interesting because I see a lot of teams that play sports on the base, and they tend to warm up by just going for a nice slow jog and then doing some dynamic stretches, like maybe it's jumping jacks or things like that. But sports like volleyball, basketball, soccer, hockey, or floor hockey, all of those involve a lot of jumping, landing, and pivots, okay, which need to be included in that active warm-up. So you can see some stats on the bottom, but what I'm going to highly recommend is look at the motions that you're doing and mimic those at a lower intensity for your active warm-up. Running strategies. If you do not run regularly or have not run regularly over the last 6 months, I think that's important to mention. You really want to limit the time that you're running until your body adjusts. So a couple of quick stats here. Limiting duration of runs to less than 30 minutes 3 times a week instead of 45 minutes 3 times a week can decrease your injuries by 50%. That's that slow progression. You need to work into things. 45 minutes is a long time for people who don't run on a regular basis, even if it is only 3 times a week. Next point, limit frequency of 30-minute runs to 3 times a week instead of 5 times per week. That decreases your injuries by 70%. These are not small numbers. They are big numbers. And running is one of the issues in the Canadian Armed Forces that causes our injuries. So paying attention to these is very, very important. You also want to limit running time and duration if there's other weight-bearing activities on the same day. We talked about this, alternating those high and low impact days. So things like jumping, drill, rucksack marches, etc. If you're doing those, make sure that you are not running on the same days. This is a big one, and we still get a lot of questions about it, but you want to make sure you are avoiding endurance running in combat boots. So to be clear, there's nothing wrong with drills or where you're doing short sprints to cover and you're kind of transitioning like that, but the endurance running in combat boots can cause a lot of injuries. It's actually the CLS has banned it, and you can see the quotes for the Canlan Gens below it. A couple biggest reasons for that is one, boots are heavy. It doesn't matter what type of boot it is, they are heavier than running shoes, and that will change the way you run and your mechanics. They also typically will cause you to heel strike, which can lock out that heel and knee joint, which can cause stress to the lower back and hips as well. And with boots, you do tie them, which can cut off circulation to one of your major tendons you need for running, your Achilles. So making sure that you are avoiding running in those combat boots is very, very important. We do get a lot of questions about things like Iron Warrior and events like that. They are listed as a forced march, so technically you shouldn't be endurance running in your combat boots anyway. And obviously, I would suggest that if you are running during your training that you wear regular sneakers and make sure that all of your marches are in your boots. Number 6, introduce interval running. So whenever we talk about interval running, it's my assumption that most people think speed, have to go fast. That's not always the case. You don't have to go as fast as you can, but even increasing your aerobic capacity to about 70% of your max effort, you'll see a huge benefit in that. Making sure that your intervals are actually quite small. So start with 4 to 6 intervals of 30 seconds fast run to a 1-minute walk. Okay, and then progression within 4 to 6 weeks and gradually increasing those intervals. A lot of different ways you can do intervals, especially once you're used to them. You can add in time, you can do distance, whatever works for you. but these will definitely help increase your aerobic capacity more so than just those longer runs will. When you are doing any type of lifting or squatting or picking things up off the floor, number 7, keep a natural low back curve is extremely important. Let me just pull my there. Yeah, it's extremely important. So what we mean by keep a natural low back curve is if you can see both of these individuals in the picture, there's almost like an S curve in their low back. That helps keep that spine strong and loaded, and it won't kind of cause that low back to pull or have an undue stress to it. So making sure you're keeping that low back curve, and if you start to lose it, that is that point where you should not be lifting weight. You should not be going down that low. Okay, so again, it's a tool that you can practice with. One of my favorite drills to practice with this is putting my toes to the wall and trying to sit back as far as I can without falling. Good safety tip, maybe put a bench or a chair behind you as well. And that will help you practice kind of keeping your back straight and that low back curve. Sports protective equipment. So I'm going to say, as you're reading these, all of these are probably very common sense. And we know that if we wear them, we will reduce the risk of injuries. This isn't just common sense, it's evidence-based. It has been proven. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like to wear this protective gear because it can be uncomfortable, it can be expensive. Maybe they feel it's not necessary, or maybe they can't move as fast. But all of these things will help reduce your risk of injuries. And some of them are mandatory in the calf for the sports that we play. So just keeping that in mind, oftentimes people that avoid these types of things haven't been injured, and we want to make sure that you don't get injured. So if you can, please wear some of this protective gear. And if you have any questions on where you can access some of it, please contact your local PSP fitness office. Number 9, sit less. So sitting 6 hours or more per day, even if you exercise, results in a 40% chance, greater chance of dying within 15 years than someone sitting 3 hours or less per day. I remember reading this statistic the very first time. I'm like, well, you know, I take my lunch hour and I go for long runs and I work out on the weekends. But the rest of my time, I do spend sitting. I sit in the car at least an hour a day. I sit at the office. I sit on my computer doing things, talking to people, sometimes watching TV at night. So I do spend a lot of sitting, or I did. So it doesn't even matter if you are an extremely fit individual. If you are spending a lot of time sitting, you will increase your chance of dying within 15 years than someone else who sits a lot less. Best tips for that is, if you're going to sit every hour, try to get up and do some stretches. Kind of undo the sitting that you did. So you know you're sitting and you're slouched, maybe your shoulders are rolled, so roll your shoulders back, take some time, open up. You know you're kind of decreasing that angle between your quads and your hip. So take some time and stretch out those hip flexors, really lengthen those muscles, and even do things like some jumping jacks to get your cardiovascular system moving again. Try to do that every hour for like 5 or 10 minutes if you possibly can, to kind of get everything moving and help increase your chances of staying healthy. I cannot emphasize how important physical activity is. I know Dr. Daryl Menard, our head of the Injury Reduction Strategies Division in CFMWS, has always quoted that exercise is medicine, and I believe that to be 100% true. If you even look at these statistics, you can see amazing stats in terms of how physical activity can affect our health. Our bodies are meant to move. They're not meant to sit for longer periods of time. So the more movement that you can have, the better. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be workouts. You don't have to be set and go to a gym to do the structured workout. Simply going for a walk, playing with your kids, running around, playing a game, all of those things can count towards your daily physical activity. All right, we're on our last slide. Top 10 in review. So those high and low impact days. I will say too that it is very important to have a structured program if you have goals. Oftentimes I have people request programs and they're like, I want to run a 5K. And I'm like, okay, by when, how long do you want it to take you, how much time do you have to train? There's so much more to it. So if you're looking to do any type of programming, use the high-low impact days as a guide. But if you want to get more serious, make sure you take the time to talk to your PSP fitness staff, and they will be able to help you put together a periodized program that will help reduce those injuries as well. Progress slowly, start small. Even if you are very, very fit, if you're changing modalities, you've got to take that time and have that 5 to 10% progression. Active warm up. So what that means is figure out what it is you're doing in your activity. If it's basketball, take some time, do some pivots, run backwards, do some jumping, do some landing, warm up everything that you're going to be using during that workout. Running strategies. We talked a lot about running today. I typically do with this presentation because it does cause the most injuries in the Canadian Armed Forces. But making sure that you are limiting to 3 times a week and less than 30 minutes if you are just getting started in any program, and making sure you're going at your pace, not someone else's, is also important. Try to avoid running in those combat boots, the endurance running piece. Introduce some interval running. It doesn't mean you have to run as fast as you can, but it's very small stints of faster type running, which will work your anaerobic system and increase your aerobic capacity. If you're lifting, pulling, or putting anything overhead, you want to make sure you're keeping that natural low back curve, also very important. Wear your protective sports gear, whether you are playing sports like hockey, broomball, basketball, soccer, you're maybe going snowboarding. So things like, typically now we usually think about helmets, but also things like those wrist guards to prevent you from that fall forward or backwards. All of that stuff is really, really important. And I think most of us realize that it will help reduce injuries. The last 2 points, a lot of people don't realize that it plays into reducing your injuries as well. Sit less, so get up, move more, helps your body recover, keeps your blood flowing, okay, and will ultimately help you live longer. And keep active daily. It doesn't mean you have to work out daily, but keep moving, keep that blood flowing, and that will keep all of those cardiovascular diseases and so on kind of to the wayside. That's all I have for my presentation today. I was really excited to give it and deliver it. I hope that you were able to learn something from it. If you have any questions in Borden, we are located at the Buell Fitness and Aquatic Center, but you can find all of our information on CAF Connection. So please look us up. And if we can help you or your unit in any way to help reduce injuries, please let us know. Have a great day.